Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. What we have here is a 2011 GMC Yukon. Had a oil leak, axle leak at this seal right here. So this video is going to show you how to change that seal. Full disclosure, I started filming this when I already had the axle on the bench. So I'm just going to show you a couple things first until we get into the disassembly of the unit. You can do this without taking the axle completely out and disassembling the passenger wheel. So what you want to do is break this flange right here, take these two nuts off, and then you could take these bolts out. There are two locating pins. You can see that hole under the bolt. There's one here, and then there's one on the other side. This housing's aluminum, so it might be seized in there from oxidation. So once you have these bolts out, I left one on each side, just threaded in a couple of turns, and you just lightly tap this with a dead blow where the pin is, and you'll see it break loose pretty quickly. And I was able to get a thin blade screwdriver in there and lightly pull it out. Didn't take much effort at all to get it out. You have this one connector right here you're gonna undo, and on the other side there's a retainer that you have to undo. Try not to break the clip. Another thing is when you take these two nuts off, it allows you to drop this differential down enough to be able to slide this axle, this flange, past this flange. And what you're going to notice is, and you'll see this in the install video, I go into detail about this, but in between these two ears, it's you have like a relief right here. So the air on the axle is actually going to swing right past this flange to be able, you have just enough room to clear it without having to remove this axle, so it can be done. But you'll see it when we're putting it back together. I go into detail knowing that you're not getting that detail now with me removing it, but this can all be done without taking apart the passenger wheel, and it's actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. It's not too bad of a job. This is all the tools I use, guys. There's no special tools to do this. 15 millimeter, 18 millimeter sockets and wrenches. I did use the impact gun to break the nuts loose to the chassis, but I mean, you could do that with a breaker bar too. So yeah, you don't need anything special to complete this. All right, so we got the axle on the bench here. As you can see, there's two locating pins, two dowel pins. I can put this on an angle so you can see it better. Those two pins go into the case, and with the aluminum, it can get oxidized and get a little seized in there, so you might have to tap the flange. I did have to do it. I tapped all the way around with a ball peen hammer lightly just to break it, and then I was able to get a thin blade screwdriver in here and just lightly pry it out, and it popped right out. So I have taken this apart already, but just for the ease with the video, so I'm not struggling. So you want to take off this little stub shaft. You'll see a washer underneath it. You just want to make sure you keep everything the same as it came off. This washer probably doesn't matter, but there is a part that does. So here's your clutch, your center gear, and your clutch fork, which will push this gear up and down if you're selecting four-wheel drive. This solenoid right here will push up on this plunger, which will drive this up and lock it into this stub shaft, which locks your axle, your hub. So put that off to the side, and then right in here, you'll see a groove right where my thumb is in the axle. That's where this ring is. It's not really a snap ring. It's kind of like a split ring. And if you just take I use this pick right here. I put the pick underneath the edge and then popped it up out of the groove onto the spline, and then you can work your way all the way around. You can use a thin blade screwdriver or the pick, and then just slide it up, and you'll get that unlocked. Then you have this retainer here that's underneath that ring, and this you want to keep in the right direction. So I don't know if you can see it in the camera or not, but it's kind of like a Bellevue washer. So it is dished. So you want to make sure it came out like this. It's kind of like a bowl. So you want to make sure it goes back in the same orientation. So put that off to the side, and then you can slide your housing right off. And then there you go, you got your axle or the shaft anyway. And there's that groove in that right here at the end where the spline is. I think you can see that. So it's pretty straightforward, not a big deal. The seal I also did already get out. So you flip it over, there's your seal, or the bore for the seal. This is the old one. So it does say on the end, air side. The new seal also says air side. So if you flip it over, you'll see the pry mark right there. So what I did was I just took I took this guy right here, this foot, and I ended up putting it under like this. See if I can get a good view of that. I can actually line it up right where it was. Put it under like that. The seal removal tools also. I just had this in my box, and I was able to put the foot on the edge of the seal on the opposite end, and then just pry it right out. So I just kind of worked it all the way around. Didn't put a ton of tension on it, and it started working its way out. So that's the old seal. And then if you notice that there's a bunch of renditions of these seals, different part numbers. It looks like they revised them quite a bit actually. So here's the old one, air side. Here's the new one, air side. Looks a little different. I checked the ODID. It is the same. It's the right seal. Then when you flip it over, this side's flat with like a steel retainer to hold the internals. And when you flip this one over, it does not. And what I noticed with this guy, the center actually rotates. It's almost like a labyrinth seal. I don't know if that's by design or not. I'm thinking it is. But this is the guy I'm going to use. I went on the GM Parts Direct, and this is the seal that it came up with, the part number. But I did buy it off of Amazon. It actually has, they had the correct seal on Amazon for, I don't know, probably half price. And here's the part number. This is the GM part number for that seal, 227611722. So that's this guy. And then I also got the gasket. I guess in 08, this is a 2011. In 08, they didn't use a gasket. They used a sealant. But this did have a factory gasket in it. And I did get a new factory gasket. And that part number is 152-70970. So what I'm going to do now is just clean this up really well. And then like where the bearing race is and the clutch fork, I'll lube all that up with fresh gear oil as I put it back together. And then this seal, I'm actually going to put on the outside just a very, very light smear of gasket sealer. I like to use, see if I have it right here, the Right Stuff gasket maker. Yeah, it's folded over so you can't see it, but it's the right stuff. I swear by it. I use it for everything. I never have leaks, and if I gotta take it apart, it's not a bear to get it back apart again. So I'm gonna start reassembling this. All right, so I got the seal. Like I said, I put a light smear all the way around of Right Stuff. Cleaned it up really good, and I was able to center it. And down below, you have those locating pins. You want to put a piece of wood. You want to block it so that the pins aren't hitting the table. So when you're hammering the seal in, you're not damaging those pins or the flange. So put a block of wood at the bottom, center with the tube. This was able, so far it's hand pressed. I put a block on top and then just pushed it down by hand, nice and easy, and I got it to there. So now I'm going to drive it home. All right, so I got the block on top, and I'm just going to tap it with a dead blow, nice and square, centered. It's almost there. You can hear the difference when you're starting to hit it nice and square. So that seals in. It's nice and flush. So now we can start reassembly. All right, so before we put this axle in, we got the new seal in. Just want to take a little bit of clean gear oil and lube up this ID. There's looks like there's 2 O-rings in there, and then you have a lip seal. So you don't want to roll those O-rings or cut them as you're putting the new axle shaft in. And I'm also going to tip this over to the side and put some fresh oil on here. Make a little bit of mess. It is a messy job. So now we'll put this shaft, drop it on the table, literally. I'm going to turn this housing over, and we'll slide this right on. All right, so now when you get to that machine surface at the end of this axle, you're going to get some resistance as you're pushing it on. And you just want to have it nice and square as you're seating that seal. There we go. So it seals on. It'll pull back as we tighten it up or install it. So now we're going to reverse the process. All right, so we have all the parts cleaned up, ready for reassembly. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I don't like to use razor blades or scrapers on aluminum. So I did use the sharpening stone on this surface again. It's nice and smooth. I cleaned up all the internals. So we're going to start with the first piece. So we're going to go concave side up. That's how it came out. Put a little bit of oil on each side. We'll drop that in. It seems like that helps center this end of the shaft also. After that, we have this retaining ring, the split ring. So it's going to be the same way as I took it off. I'm just going to start on one side and then work my way all the way around. Get it onto the splines. Like that. And then now that it's open, now I can start just working its way down the splines into that groove. Okay, we're almost there. Grab that pick. There. So I have one side in right now, one side out. And if I wanted to take this back out again, the side that's out, I would start working all the way around to pop out the side that's in, if that makes sense. I'll just go right around. So that's in. I like to just rotate it. It should be nice and loose once it's in that groove, which it is. So we're good there. All right, next step is this fork and gear. Gotta get the spring back on. Put a little bit of oil inside where the gear sits. I'm also gonna take the gear and just put a little bit of oil. Oil's slinging in there, so you can't put too much. All right, make sure I have this the right way. Oh, and I don't. Plunger side down. There we go. All right, so the next step is this washer, which is pretty flat. I don't think it matters which way it goes, but I'm going to put it in the same way it came out. And this side was down, I could tell just by the grooves from the end of this axle. So that went on like that. Again, put some more oil on it. Put some oil on all these surfaces. I am just going to pour just a tiny bit of oil down on the teeth themselves. All right. Last but not least, just set this guy on top. And that's it. So this is fully assembled, ready to go back in. Hopefully you can see this, but so this is how this actuates before I put it back together. So here's your hub. This would be a passenger side wheel, just freewheeling, not connected to the axle. And then when this solenoid's activated and this picks this fork up, it's going to pick that fork right up and lock that gear into this bigger gear. And this bigger gear is splined onto the axle shaft going to the front differential. And now as you can see, it's locked. And then when you shut four-wheel drive off, this drops off and then you're freewheeling again. All right, so we're all prepped, ready to go to install this. I cleaned up this gasket surface also. It looks good. Another thing I want to note is the oil that came out of this looked horrible. It was a dark gray, a lot of clutch material. Like I said, this truck has about 220,000 miles, and this is probably the first time this oil was ever drained. So I am a little concerned about the clutches in this limited slip, but it is the front axle. It's rarely used. I've had this truck for almost since new, and the way winters are in New England, I'm not too worried about it. Even if we get a good snowstorm, a day or two, the roads are clear. But I'm sure it'll still lock. And I got the new gasket on, fits great, everything looks good. You never want to reuse the new gasket. The old gasket, this old gasket's flat where the O-ring is on the inside, believe it or not. There's a little red ring all the way around. It's like an O-ring. The new one is actually raised and you can feel it. So I would definitely replace the gasket. So I'm gonna get this installed. I'll probably get a couple bolts in, and I'll show you the angle that you have to get this in on. All right, so I have the axle in place. I have 2 bolts holding it. It's not completely seated yet. It's not flush. You do not want to force this in. It should go in by hand. One thing I wanted to show you before I fully pop it out is this is how close it is from having to take the passenger side axle right out. So you get just enough room to pull down on the entire differential. You get to a point where you only have just a hair more to go. And if you line up these 2 axles exactly like that, it'll be just enough room to be able to pull it back. So you can do this without removing the passenger side front axle. It can be done with it in place. As you can see, it is tight. When you undo these 2 nuts for this axle and you pull this down, you get just enough play to line up this ear into the center of these 2 ears, and it'll be just enough to get this out of the way. But now I just released some of the tension, so now I can feel if this is going in by hand or not, which you can see as I'm wiggling it. It's nice and loose. I'm not gonna force it in, and I'll torque these bolts down. And I'll throw the bolts in for these two faces, tighten that up, fill it up with oil, and we'll be good to rock. All right, so we're completely installed. The flange is tightened up 58 foot-pounds. I socked these down with the impact, I'd say around 110 foot-pounds. I got the connector back on. These are all torqued down to 58 foot-pounds. I just gotta fill it up with oil, and then we can test it out. Overall, I'd say it's a very doable job in the driveway. I know I'm on a lift, but you could definitely do this on a set of ramps. This flange right here is what really helps you. If you didn't have this and you had to take apart the whole passenger side assembly to get that axle out, this would kind of be a pain of a butt to do. But the fact that you can split that flange, it's really not a terrible job. All right, so we're ready to fill this with oil. You can see the drain plugs here right above that. This big port, I already pulled the plug out. So what we're gonna do is I have a hand pump for the oil for the bottle, and I'm gonna hand pump this in until it overflows. And that's your fill level, the bottom of this port. And here's the plug, just to get an idea. It was in there pretty good. It was the first time it's been cracked open since this truck was new. So I just put a wrench on it and a dead blow at the end of the wrench and just knocked it free. I was able to take it right out. But that's your plug. For oil, I'm going to use 8090 Castrol Axle Limited Slip. And here's the hand pump. Nothing special. It's just a cheap plastic pump. I figured I'd get a few uses out of it and throw it away, but I've actually had it for quite some time. So I'm going to pump this in there until it overflows. All right, so we're full. It took about almost the full 2 bottles. You see it still dripping out of there. So I'm going to put that plug in, tighten it up, let it down, and take it for a ride. And then I'll just double check to see if this seal's leaking anymore. One more thing before you take it for a ride, I'd suggest hitting all your joints that have been broken open, like the plug and the fill, the axle. Hit it all with brake clean, just so that after you go for a ride, you'll see right away if you still have a leak. All right, I just came back from a pretty good ride. As you can see, it's nice and dry. I'll keep an eye on it for the next couple of weeks, but everything's looking pretty good. Everything looks dry. Drove nice. I actuated the four-wheel drive, no issues. Went right into four-wheel, so everything looks good. All right, guys, well, that's a wrap on the Yukon axle seal replacement. If you found this video helpful, if you could please consider subscribing and liking, it'd help me out tremendously. I'm working on some new content with the Camaro. I'm going to do a video on cost analysis, what it took to double the horsepower on that car, with a breakdown of part numbers and the list of costs for each part. And I'm also going to upload another video on a review. I put about 3,000 miles on it, so I have a bunch of stuff to talk about with that car. But thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one.